So as I was mentioning to you before we started recording, Andy, I live right by Largo, the original Largo that no longer is there, on Fairfax, where a little musical.
Oh,
This is actually the postcard from when it graduated to the Roxy, and I was there as well. But I got the swag, I got the merch. This was a very
where
let's
did you
show
get
them
where did you get the backstage pass?
a seat for every ass in Hollywood. I don't know. Probably at the Roxy. Like it was a big deal when the first time I went to the Roxy. It, had started at Largo and it was kind of like this underground thing. And I remember the feeling of when I went to the Roxy. It was probably around the same time you were on Conan O'Brien, or it kind of felt like the ball was rolling. Like pretty soon this was going to Broadway, or that's how it
Yes.
felt.
Yeah.
And so I collected everything and I saved it over the years and have such fond memories of it. And, I know I reached out to you a few years ago around the time that I kind of felt there was a time for a White Trash that wins the Lotto sequel because Guns N' Roses were back. But, at that time it wasn't the right time to talk. But all of a sudden, one day, I see that this music that was kind of like an internet white whale for all the people who were there and were trying to explain to people who weren't there, like it's so hard to explain what it is. Now it's out there for everyone to listen. So with that spiel out of the way, I think we can go into the origin stories of this, but the obvious first question is why you decided more than I think 20 years after it kind of
20,
ended its run.
25 years. Quarter of a century.
Wow. Why'd you decide to release it for the world to hear?
Well, excellent question. During the pandemic, I realized that I had a life's worth of material behind me that I had not released, and I had worked very, very, very hard on all these songs going back to the time when I was 21, 22 years old. And I decided to honor that effort that my younger self put into all this music. So I started re-recording or finding old recordings and digitizing it and working with it. And this, of course, led me to this massive body of work called White Trash Wins Lotto that if anything in my life was like Brian Wilson's smile, it was White Trash Wins Lotto. It was the thing that was such a joyous experience to put on at Largo. It was nothing but fun and hard work. And the Roxy was just enormously hard. It was really hard to put those shows up because anyway, and they were wonderful. They
Yeah.
were absolutely wonderful. Working with Brian Beacock was wonderful, and the whole cast. And then going to New York and getting the deal from Broadway, and then I have a prepared statement.
Okay. I'm all ears. I didn't even know it got that far.
Oh yeah, I got it. I got an offer. Hold a second.
Yep.
We had a very successful run for 5 years. I tried to take it to the next level, but there were contractual conflicts that could not be resolved, and I eventually lost the funding.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Well stated, succinctly stated. I'll have follow-up questions.
It's like this, Lindsay. It's like boardroom dramas. And it was basically the meeting of three worlds that just kind of clashed: the record company world, the artist world, and Broadway. And the people from Broadway were absolutely wonderful. And I'm just absolutely thrilled and absolutely honored that I got offered a deal. And that's all I really want to say.
That's
Because
fine.
and then he said, and then she said, and then I did, and then he didn't. And, you
It
know,
must have been heartbreaking though to get that far. I mean, yeah.
because it was such a joy to do. And it
Mm.
was such a relief and again, you were there. When did you start going to Largo?
I mean, I'm gonna say 97-ish,
Mhm.
98. Does that sound about right?
Okay, was Paul F. Tompkins and Greg Barron and Blaine
Yeah.
Capacity? Okay, so that's,
Blaine was IZZY. That was one of my
yeah,
favorite songs in the musical. I still could sing before. That was one of the ones that before I finally got to hear it in the last couple of months, like I still could sing that one off the top of my head. IZZY, like very,
yeah.
swashbuckling. So yes, it was, those people were in the cast at the time.
Okay, so that was about the third iteration of
Okay.
I started out with another singer, and then we went to another singer after that, and then this is about 2 years before that. And it started off as just two songs to, as I said in the backstory on the record. I don't know if you read that.
I did.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, if you download it from your website, it comes with like a PDF booklet and the lyrics and all that, which is great. I mean, God, what a, like I said, internet white whale
Thank
for
you.
me.
Like I said, I'd had a residency at Largo, which I was very, very grateful for. And after you do it, you do your show for about 4 or 5 runs, you think, I got to start freshening some stuff up. I got to freshen the setup, bring in some new songs. And I had these 2 ridiculous songs from an idea I had that I did not take serious. I had very theatrical backup singers, and I said, to Stefan, I said, why don't you do the Axl, because he's from a very Broadway-esque movie background, Hollywood background, approximate W. Axl Rose-ish character on a Broadway musical. And it just took off from there. And it was just a joke. It was just a joke, fun to do, get a lot of laughs from the audience, and then go back to doing the more serious material and then some of the other stuff. So the reaction was really, really strong and really surprising.
Yeah.
And suddenly, like I said on in the bio, the audiences started doubling. And then I started adding more, what the hell, I'll add a couple more songs to it. Yeah, because it became this thing of a vehicle to write about being in the music business in Hollywood.
That's the thing, is like, it wasn't really about Guns N' Roses or about Axl. He was more like just a foil.
He was the stick I could hit. I could hit the music industry with, and the stick I could hit Broadway with.
Well, I have a question about the fact that you chose him, because this is when we're talking mid 90s, but that you chose Axl as sort of like the canvas to paint this story on. This was in the mid 90s, literally only like 5 years before. Guns N' Roses had still been, one of the biggest bands in the world, like Use Your Illusion, to come out. Like, they were huge.
Right.
And by the mid 90s, he was already
Vanished.
He was this, it was like a Eddie and the Cruisers or something. It was just like this vanished character.
Right.
So like, tell me about how, like, the fact that there was already this mythology around him within a few years of him being the biggest rock star on the planet, like, made him a really interesting central character for this.
It was like again, like I said in the PDF, and you can edit out me saying it. It's like
No, it's fine. But I would encourage everyone, if they want more details, yeah, it's good educational material. Reading is fundamental.
It was just that moment where I was actually absolutely exasperated with songwriting, and I heard my neighbors being absolutely exasperated with their Broadway songwriting, and I just wondered idly what they would make of my life if they were going to write a musical. And then I thought, nah, I suck. I'm a terrible topic. What would they think of somebody like, I don't know, Axl Rose? Because Axl at that time had vanished. So there was a lot of chitter chatter in the press and a lot of chitter chatter around town that somebody saw Axl, somebody, they think he's here, he's this, all these rumors, but just idle rumors. Nobody, I wasn't sitting down wondering and pondering what had happened to where he had gone, but the band had kind of fallen apart. He had vanished, and he was a missing character. So it just idly crossed my mind, like, what would these people behind my house, these Broadway songwriters who knew nothing about, assuming they knew nothing about metal and Hollywood and Guns N' Roses, what they would make of it. That's all it was. That's all it started with. And it could have been, any LA metal dude, but that's when it crossed my mind, because that's what was kind of floating around in the atmosphere at the time. Nothing more serious than that.
Well, what's interesting now, I mean, you say nothing more serious than that, but now to listen to it in 2024, just there are multiple things that hit different now. And one of them is the ending, which, sorry if I'm spoiling for anyone, but spoiler alert, the ending is sort of how he has this opportunity to die young, leave a good looking corpse, be forever immortalized like Jim Morrison, who's a Père Lachaise or whatever. And he, correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but
No,
he basically, he refuses this opportunity.
Right.
And now he's back out there with a semi-reunited Guns N' Roses without IZZY. It's not Guns N' Roses.
Without Izzy, no.
But anyway, GNR are reunited. They're touring all the time, and he does not look like how he did in 1987. And he sometimes gets flack for that. People are mean about his looks or about how he sounds now. He didn't go, oh, he went away quietly for a while, but then he came back and basically got old in the public eye. And, so now when I hear that final song where like Axel, the character Axel, refuses to go to rock and roll heaven or whatever, it just kind of like art imitated life a little bit, or life imitated art, I should say.
The finale is actually Axel at LAX, and he's leaving to parts unknown. That's the big finale. You're thinking of the graveyard sequence where Jim is.
Okay, I apologize. I have not seen this on a stage since,
Right.
1990.
It's there on a record. So in the finale, he is saying, I'm leaving to get the one elusive pleasure that's left. He's conquered the world, he's cheated death, yet there is one pleasure of which I'm bereft. Bitches and treasures cannot be measured to this one pleasure I'm bereft that's left. And then everybody's saying, well, what is left? What is left? What is left? And what I had him do is say, I'm going to throw everything away and I'm going to get the one thing I lack. Now this is 1991 or 92. I can't remember the exact year. So he's saying, I'm trying to get the one elusive pleasure that's left. What is left? And the whole crowd on stage is wondering what is left, what is left, what is left. And he says, the one thing I lack is a big fucking comeback. A comeback. The one thing that I lack is a big fucking comeback. And then everybody starts singing a comeback, a comeback, a comeback, a comeback. Won't it be grand when I fire the band? And then you'll come back. Slash, I have trash for he's too often smashed, and then you'll come back. And this was inadvertently, accidentally prescient on my part, because I had done all this research. I'd had to research Axl, and I thought, this gentleman thrives on opposition. He thrives on it. The thing that you tell him he can't do, he will do. I just thought, well, what's the one thing he shouldn't do? He shouldn't fire the band and reform it with all other musicians. And that's exactly what he did, because I had the sense that his character would want that kind of opposition, like saying, you can't do that. Yes, I can. So that's where that's where the musical actually ends, is he's leaving off to new parts, and he's gonna work to have a big comeback. And he did. He did with Chinese Democracy. He tried that. Well, he tried that. And so
the reunion tour, though, it's been multiple tours at this point, has been very successful, though.
And that's the next part I'm gonna go to. What he chose to get old. He chose the brave thing to do. He didn't choose the real Axl did not choose to do the cowardly thing, which is to die young and leave a beautiful corpse. He chose to get old and face old age and face his own mortality. And God bless him for that, because that's what I really admire him for, for this incredibly successful world tour. And for getting up there, and maybe he doesn't look the same that he did at 21. Neither do I, neither do any of us. And that's the brave thing to do. That is the courageous thing to do, is to live your life and work, oh God, in honor of your gifts. If serve the music. God bless.
I 100% agree. I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but what was he had to have known about this musical. I imagine he might have even tried to stop it.
No, God.
Well, a friend of mine designed t-shirts with his face, and there was litigation. Those t-shirts were pulled off the market.
Well, here's the situation, is that first off, I heard some rumors, and they were great. They never stopped us. I only use things that were public knowledge. Trust me, I had people coming up to me saying, hey, I got this story about Axl, you got to hear. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to hear that. I'm not going to do this to this man. I'm not going to go in his bedroom. I'm not going to tiptoe around his private life. If it's a matter of public record, I can sing about it. So also, the musical is a musical about a guy writing a musical about Axl Rose. So I'm kind of legally, I think I'm safe there. And you know what? in the end, if Axl wanted a piece, we give him a piece. Or
I mean,
Guns N' Roses wanted a piece, take a piece.
when did you move to Los Angeles?
1982 from San Francisco.
So you were in LA when this whole Sunset Strip, maybe you weren't part of the scene, I don't know, but you were definitely witness to it. The
I was
Sunset Strip, all that.
I was on Melrose. I was working when I was in Walla Voodoo. I was also working on at the soap plant on Melrose, and I saw all those guys working down the street at Flash Feet of London, at Joseph and Henry's record store,
Retail Slut.
retail spot.
That's where Slash got his hat. Fun fact, he stole it from Retail Slut.
You know, my bass player from Walla Voodoo worked in retail sluts. So, you know, we just saw these guys around, and it was no different than them seeing me and I seeing them. And then it just exploded. And, you know, it was not my scene. It was not the kind of music that I listen to or enjoy. And,
Mm-hmm.
but, you know, I like the way, you know, I was relieved that we could wear our hair long and poofy again.
And I would take, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so I would take like 3 buses, as they were called at the time, the RTD, to go to Melrose. I probably bought soap from you or books. Soap Plan was it's actually one of the few stores from that era, although it's now in Los Feliz. It's like one of the few stores from that era of Melrose that still exists. But that it was an interesting time. And this is one of the things that I loved about the musicals. Maybe it was a little too, as they say in the biz, I don't know, inside baseball or too inside jokey, because when to maybe be like a big Broadway mainstream thing, I say that with love, because when I first saw it at Largo, I was like, oh my God, Andy like wrote this for me, like get out of my head. Like I was like, this is my life. And I also worked at a record company at the time. So I was like, oh, and also my favorite band growing up. And the first concert I ever went to see was Duran. So I was like, get out of my head, Andy Prieboy. Like, you know, did you read my diaries? Like it was there were so many levels. And in LA in the 80s, it wasn't just that scene. There was, you know, the whole like death rock scene that was
Right.
happening, the goths and the punks, and you know, if you go to the early, probably the Mask was still around when you moved here. And
No, the mask was closed when I got here. But
okay.
that's a good point because you know, what we were trying to do costume wise, which we needed to do a little bit more work for, but in the opening scene at Guitar Center, which is taking place about 1992, we wanted to have all the different styles because back then nobody knew what the next thing was going to be. Is it going to be another Duran Duran kind of a band? Is it going to be a kind of a Sisters of Mercy band? Is it going to be rockabilly? Is it going to be cowpunk? And is it going to be glam? Is it going to be metal? Is it going to? And it was just this great melange of styles.
I just happened to realize that I have this book here. This book, More Fun Than New World, the Unmaking and Legacy of LA Punk, that John Doe co-wrote, is all about this stuff, all this stuff that was going on, the Paisley Underground, all of that stuff. So LA was a really interesting time, and you kind of skewer like every you know, you make fun of every trope. It's all dead on, including all the record company assholes, which we'll talk about. But like, no one emerges totally unscathed, or you know, that's why I like, you know, was like, damn, yeah, this is spot on. So,
And the whole
um,
thing of the one of the subtext that didn't come out in the musical, but in writing it is I would have loved to have a great stage name. I would have loved to have a great stage name. Andy Prieboy, do you know how hard that is for people to pronounce? You know, like 9 times out of 10 people get it wrong. I had one interviewer accuse me of having a pretentious last name because they thought I was trying to say pretty boy. And,
oh,
you
Free
know,
Boy Floyd.
yeah, it's like Slovak. It's a Slovak name. So the whole thing of Izzy wanting a bitchin' stage name, yeah, I'm making fun of myself on that too. So I would have loved to have a bitchin' stage name, but it
I
never.
think Prebor's a pretty bitchin' stage name, but obviously, you know, you're the narrator, not, I mean, you literally physically were the narrator on the stage. And obviously, this is a story. I mean, I get the impression that this is a story as more about you than about Axel. Like, I'm wondering if there were a lot of things based on your
Yeah,
own travails in the music business. For instance, the Duran Duran song, where like these, you know, sheepish
yeah,
A&R people are saying, oh, we got to find the next Duran Duran and sign
that,
them right away. Is that like a conversation that you
It's just
overheard or
it's a reality that we musicians go through, is that you know, they're not signing a band like you. Yeah, we have a lot of bands like you on the roster. We're looking for this kind of band. Or when metal hit, you're all gone. All the, you know, REM spin-off bands, all the synth bands, all the art bands. This is what happened on IRS label. They're all gone. And we're going to
mm,
hire these bands. We're going to sign these bands that are guitar bands. It's like, uh, weren't you kind of the alternative artist, independent artist label? Yeah, but this is what's really happening. So yeah, I watched that. And on a personal level, things like the graveyard sequence, the uh, in the Throne of the Lizard King, that was somewhat of a tribute to my friend Stiv Bators, who
oh,
uh, really, really loved the whole mystique of dying young, and Jim Morrison and Pere Lachaise. He was enthralled by that, and that's wonderful to talk about. But when you're no longer here, you know, it's sort of inspired by Stiv. The part the in the Rocking Dead. Hold a second, let me gather my thoughts. You have to forgive me, Lindsay. This is the first interview I've done in 25 years on White Trash. So, uh,
really?
oh yeah.
I'm so honored that you agreed to
Well, you
do
know,
it.
it's like when you surfaced again, for years I've been thinking, that woman was so nice to offer an interview. I turned her down, and then you showed up, and it's like, yay! So that's
Yay.
why I said it's something I wanted to do
Awesome.
for
I'm so
you.
glad you did. Thank you.
Um, there's the incantation: rise ye up, ye slaughtered lambs, unlamented, unknown bands. Here by your despair were led. O rise ye up, you rocking dead. Risen we who sang in vain, who to please and entertain were robbed, raped, starved, and bled. Risen we, the rocking dead. That I wrote for Mark Moreland, who was a guitar player in Wall of Voodoo, who was in France at the time, struggling and suffering with what would turn out to be a fatal case of cirrhosis of the liver.
Oh,
And, you know, I was really, you know, horrified by that, and that inspired that. So there was a lot of that in it as well. Personal feelings all throughout the thing, you know. And so anyway,
also just also in you know, and the character, the narrator character, you know, there's a dry wit, a cynicism, a sort of bitterness to it. Like, you know, as much as this is a hilarious musical and it's a delight and it's a romp. There is, you know, it's very snarky, in a way that's good, but you know, again, and
the
that's how
way
I
my inspiration from this started, if I can go back,
absolutely.
started in 1986. Watch this. I went and visited a friend of mine named Morley Sobo, who was a A&R representative in the classical music department at MCA Records. And I stopped in and I saw her, and we had a very nice afternoon, and she gave me a bunch of cassettes. And one of the cassettes was of Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado, with featuring Eric Idle from Monty Python in it. And it hit me as hard as when you hear somebody said the first time they ever heard Bob Dylan, or John Lennon talking about the first time he ever heard Elvis Presley. Gilbert and Sullivan hit me that hard, and I could not put that tape off for years. And I kept thinking, this is so beautiful, and it's so heartlessly cruel and exact in its perceptions on humanity. I remember just thinking, it's so exact on its perceptions. And I remember at the time thinking, if only somebody could write music like this now, where it's this beautiful, and yet it is this heartlessly observant towards humanity, towards whatever. And it naturally, that's all I was listening to back then. And
Wow.
cut to 1992, 93, when I was sitting in my studio, completely frustrated, that all kind of came together. And that's been my guiding star, is Verdi, Mozart's comedies, Gilbert and Sullivan, you know, and I do some Broadway pastiche.
Yeah.
You the Guitar Center and LA Alleluia and all that kind of crap. But there are other songs in it that I take very, very seriously in a comedic sense. And the thing is that what I always wanted to do, I'm sorry, am I boring you? Am I just prattling on?
No, do I look bored? I'm like staring at you with
Okay.
wide, fascinated eyes. Please continue.
The thing is to never make the music cheap. Make the music
Mhm.
as beautiful and beautiful as you can make it. And that's what I aimed for. Even in songs like "Do What We Want," um, there's the part where the A&R representative sings, "By the stroke of a pen, we send her to oblivion. All her days condemned, condemned to dream what might have been." Well, that's really the story of most of us in Hollywood, condemned to dream of what might have been. So much of us have come close. So many of us have come close. So many of us have lost those opportunities. And I really wanted that moment to really bring the musical down, bring the comedy down to that harsh reality. And then boom, go back to the comedy, but just wanted to hit that moment. And so I always loved that moment. And there's a couple of other moments in the musical like that.
Yeah, that I remember that being obviously it's the character Vicky Harrison, but we all know it's Vicky Hamilton. And we all know Vicky Hamilton's story. And yeah, I remember that. I mean, it hit me hard when I just listened to it, but it hit me hard even then. Like, she is kind of one of those famous, people who got, screwed over and, didn't get rewarded for everything
Right.
she did for Guns N' Roses and a couple other bands as well. And yeah, that one hit me hard. Kind of hit me hard a little bit in a different way now, listening to it now after like the Time's Up movement and the Me Too movement and stuff, to hear like, it again was very prescient to hear a song now that was written 25 years ago or so about like a bunch of white middle-aged A&R guys saying, "Oh, she's just a chick.
Sure. Yeah.
We can do what we want with her.
Well,
She doesn't matter."
the Old Boys Club. I mean, that's another song in the musical that's, does full circle with that. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm glad that it hit home,
it
and I'm glad.
absolutely did. I think it
I
did
would,
what you were trying to, it
yeah.
had the effect you were trying for.
When we hit that line about "Do what we want" to the C word, and just hear the women, I every night would hear the women in the audience scream, but it wasn't a scream of being horrified, but it was you could just tell that they were going, "Yes, exactly."
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Yeah, a scream of acknowledgement. Yeah. I mean, it absolutely, it was effective. It's very interesting that you did, all this, that this was a Gilbert and Sullivan inspired musical, because probably a lot of people would expect that a musical that was about the Census Strip and LA in the 80s and Guns N' Roses would be a hard rock musical. And there's pretty
No,
much no guitars on this
there is
score.
absolutely no guitars on this. And
Okay.
I mean, we have a keyboard playing guitar. There are no guitars on this because what I wanted to do was a musical allegory. To me, to sing about the majesty and the manic energy of rock and roll, of the rock and roll lifestyle, there's two things going on. One is the best way to uh, uh, depict the rock life, if you is through comedy. Because to do it serious always gets overplayed. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. Whenever they do rock music, musicals or rock music, it's always over serious. It's overstated. So I always thought that this kind of gallows humor uh, portrays it much more accurately. The second thing was that musically, as I said, it's an allegory. If you use electric guitars to talk about the majesty of success, well, where's the contrast? But if you make it sound like classical music played really loud, this is what it sounds like when you're going up the ladder. It sounds like Mozart played at 10. That's what it feels like. That's what I was going for, was a musical allegory. Also, at the time there was a quote unquote revolutionary rock musical that was really, really good.
I
Oh,
need to talk
I
to
don't
you
want
about.
to say. I
I
don't want to
was.
say.
Uh,
Don't want to say.
uh, uh,
Don't want heat
it
now.
was on my list of questions about how you felt about a certain.
Hedwig.
Oh no, I love Hedwig. Hedwig's one of my favorites. Do you not
Uh,
like? Okay,
the
I
other
love
one.
Hedwig.
The other one.
Rock of Ages.
Oh, that.
I want to know how you feel about Rock of Ages, because Rock of Ages happened a few years later, and obviously extremely different. First of all, just a silly love story. Second of all, it's using existing music, songs by,
Well, with that,
and but it does sort of have some similarities. The era it takes place in, the breaking of the fourth wall a little bit, the sort of like making
yeah,
fun of music.
Chris and I are friends. I never saw it. It's not anything that I would really care to see. It's just sounded kind of.
It's cute. I like it for what it is. It's very different. But when it started, because I saw a workshop of that, and like, I don't know, when Chris Hardwick was in it, and I just remember thinking like, oh, there was already a musical about this era that I liked better or whatever. I just,
Well,
if
one
you
is
haven't seen it, you haven't seen it.
well, one is like I said, it's a jukebox musical, and the other one
Mm,
is original composition. So they're kind of two different worlds.
yeah.
And I can't really comment because I haven't seen it, but the other subtext to White Trash is that this is what's going to happen to your rock and roll rebel heroes sooner than you think. Just so you know, this is not what it really looks like. In a few years' time, you're going to have Tom Cruise playing an Axl Rose character. You're going to have the all-American feel-good kind of guy playing him, and that's what my job was to say, to juxtapose that, to say this is what's going to happen to your quote-unquote rock and roll here rebels, your dangerous boys. They're going to become sanitized, and your mom and dad are going to go see it, and grandma's going to say it and say, "Oh, that was a real toe tapper." So, uh, and I wanted to say this was not so. This is not how it was. So by juxtaposing Axl up against an environment where you cannot have Axl Rose on Broadway because the union wouldn't allow it. Him coming on 4 hours late? No. No, 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 no. Him deciding to play an extra 3 hours? No, the Broadway union would not allow that. So no, the other musical that was, we're going back further.
That's fine.
Um, there was a Broadway musical that was considered a rock musical that was considered very innovative. Oh, it's innovative. And to me, it was like, well, I think Meatloaf covered this territory many, many years ago. I mean, when I heard it, I'm like, well, this sounds like Meatloaf. Like
This is not Hedwig. This is something else you're
no,
talking about.
Hedwig
Okay.
was like a good band doing a good gig. This was like a little overblown.
Which one do you mind? You don't want to
Nope.
say? I have to figure it out. I'm gonna have to.
Don't
What
want to,
year? I'll figure it out later
no.
on my own.
Anyway,
It's
to me,
fine.
it was like, okay, so you tiptoed in our garden, in our rock and roll garden, and took bits and pieces that you liked and you put them on the Broadway stage, and now everybody's saying it's innovative. Now, I've seen bands starve to death doing this shit on stage, and they never got anywhere, and nobody ever said they were innovative, but now you're innovative. So that was the other thing about where I was having a real fun time with White Trash, was saying, well, I'm going to go walk around through the Broadway garden and pick and choose my little bits and see what little bits and pieces I can use and put them on the stage. And that's where I had the hoedown scene and the Guitar Center scene and LA Alleluia. Let me go through your garden and pick your little idioms and say, throw them back at your face, with Axl Rose being the stick I hit them with. Anyway,
I got it. Yeah, I'll do the math later. I'll do some. I'll figure it out. I'm good at. I'll pick up on the Easter eggs. But to go back to obviously your musical, we talked about how there was an opportunity at one time that it could have gone to Broadway. Ended up sadly not working out. But if it had gone to Broadway, do you think, you joke about like the grandmas being like, that's a toe tapper. Like, do you think it would have translated? For me, it was so smart, but it was also very LA, and it was very much about the industry. Like I said, I connected to it on every level, but I don't know if it would have been like some mainstream musical. And I say that as a compliment, by the way, but what would have happened if it had gone to Broadway?
I don't know. I, you know, I think it would have opened on 9/11.
Oh shit.
So,
So yeah.
oh, I don't know. You know, it reminds me of what Bonaparte used to say to his troops: you were born in a bivouac and you will die in a bivouac. It was, you were born in a trench, you'll die in a trench. It was not born out of me sitting down going, I think I want to write a theatrical piece about Axl Rose and the metal movement. It started off as a joke in a club. And I think that's where it thrived. I call it a cast, but it really wasn't a cast in my estimation. It was a band. I had 15 people on stage that I invited. I didn't, only one guy did uh, um, a classic audition through a cattle call, and that was the guy who played Axel at the Roxy, Brian Beacock. Everybody else was invited, had a casual maybe audition, come by my house and sing, let me hear you sing. But I had seen all these people on stage at Largo performing and thinking, that one has it, Greg Barron has it, Blaine Capatch has it, Paul F. Tompkins is fantastic, he's got it, Laura Milligan, Jackie Harris, all these comedians that I brought into the group were invited. And if I was going to go to Broadway, I would somehow have to translate that to the stage. And, that would be a 3-4 year process. When Broadway was talking to me, they were saying, well, we're going to put you up in the basement at the Goodman Theater in Chicago and workshop you for, 6 months or a year. And if the notices are good, we'll bring you upstairs and we'll workshop it there. And, that's an honor in Chicago playing at the Goodman Theater. But my cast, my band, my 15-member band, these people are working in television. These people are writers, they're comedians, they're stand-ups. They're not going to go to Chicago for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I would have to translate that into a script. Now, here's the other thing that's kind of interesting about White Trash is that with brilliant comedians like Paul F. Tompkins, Blaine Capatch, and Greg Barron, and Jackie, and all these people, is that I would say, okay, for Do What We Want, I need you to establish this point, this point, this point, and this point to set up the song. Because, we're basically loading the songs like a shotgun. Put the bullet in, cock it, fire it. Put the bullet in, cock it, fire. And I would say to these guys, here are the points you have to make, the bullet points. And I had seen them on stage, and I trusted them implicitly to improvise dialogue, make those bullet points, and set up the song so that the audience was not confused when the song started and they know exactly what was going on, and get a laugh. They were fantastic. They were magnificent. Never, ever, ever left the audience hanging. They were so funny, and I'm sitting there on stage listening to them improvise the dialogue, and I'm laughing. I'm the guy who wrote it, and every night they surprised me. So I would lose that going to Broadway. I would have to turn that into a script. And here's the thing. If somebody wants to put it on Broadway right now, I'm taking offers. But
maybe now's the time. Now there are a lot of rock musicals. They tend to be more jukebox musicals than, original material musicals, but there seems to maybe be more of an opening for it. I don't know. You would have to probably write a new ending. You'd have to put Buckethead in there with the KFC chicken hat.
Yeah, there's that chicken head. I've thought about that, Buckethead, and basically, how do I say this? It's an oratorio, is really what it is. It's an oratorio. It's a narrative piece.
Mm-hmm.
To turn it into like Act 1. Axel walks through the bedroom door and says, hey, is anybody hungry? Ha ha, audience. That would just kill it.
Yeah.
Because it had the music itself was absolutely precise and rehearsed till it squeaked. There was no improvisation in the music. We rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, because a lot of those people are not professional singers. I had like 3-4 professionals, and the rest of them could just sing. But to take that to Broadway and to script it, we'd lose that immediacy. And, you can't get millions of dollars to put a show on and say, yeah, well, we're going to make up the dialogue. They're not going to give you that money unless you're somehow proven. But what should have been done is put out the record 25 years ago and then toured it once a year in places like the Wiltern or, Roxy-sized theaters across the country, and have a ball and keep it to the audience it was for. I think Grandma would love it if she's surrounded by a bunch of rock scumbags. She would love it. But if she's in a theater and they're going to go get Chinese food afterwards, I don't think
Have
so.
you ever considered, I imagine you've had people like me who are just like, "Oh, it was so great, bring it back." Do what you said, basically, like, just bring it back in a more, like, cabaret format
Well,
or,
when I sent the album out to our lead singer, Chrissy, the female lead, Chrissy Guerrero, she wrote me back, said, if you ever want to do a concert of this, let me know. And I thought, you just sit down and do a concert
I would
without
lose
the
my mind.
without the uh without the production and the dance stuff, and just sit there on stools and sing the songs. That would be lovely. So that's a consideration.
Amazing.
Um, so I don't know. So
Well, that actually brings the point that I wanted to ask was I obviously saw the full production, and even though my memories of it are fuzzy, like it all came flooding back when I listened to it, now that it's online. But I was listening to it in the context, of remembering what the production was like, knowing the basic plot of it, what the costumes, what the all the numbers were like. For someone who just streams it now off your site or off Spotify or whatever, and they're stumbling onto it blindly. They don't know anything about it other than this is an Axl Rose, loosely based Axl Rose musical. Do you think they'll kind of get the humor or
you know, I can't really worry about that or think about it. It's what I was honoring was the work that we put in and the beautiful performances of the cast. If somebody who's 22 years old and listens to this and doesn't get why the guy doesn't sound like Axl, uh, you know, it's it's it's
that's fine.
it's fine. You'll figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, there's plenty more for you to listen to. Uh,
The Conan O'Brien performance, I believe, is the only video evidence I've ever found of any kind of obviously it's not the full production, but any kind of live performance of this because this is before people had
yeah,
cell phones and stuff. How did that Conan O'Brien performance come together?
we had a very good relationship at Largo. If you remember that Largo was constantly bombarded with people from Comedy Central, HBO, all those networks hung out there watching the comedians and friends of friends of friends. So we had a really good relationship with people at HBO. And Gary Mann, who was an executive there, had us fly out to the HBO Comedy Festival in Aspen,
Oh, wow.
which was great. The whole cast, and put us up in a great hotel. And I mean, it was the year there was the Monty Python reunion, and it was just amazing, just to go up there. Uh, and we did 2 nights in a theater. And Conan O'Brien was at the second show, and he came up and said, I really didn't want to come see this. People were saying, you got to see this Axl Rose musical. And I kept saying, no, I don't want to go see an Axl Rose musical. I know exactly what that's going to be like. And they're like, no,
No, you don't, Conan.
you don't know. This is what he said to us. He goes, you don't know, you have to go see this. He said, so I went and saw this. So I want to say, if you're ever in New York City, give me a call. I'll put you on. How,
Wow.
what a thrill. I mean, how great is that? And so a couple years later, we were in New York and we gave him a call. He said, come on on. And so he had us on, and there we were, and we did a truncated version of Guitar Center. And it was then we did 2 nights at PS 122 in New York, and that's the long and short of it. It was fantastic. It was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful moment.
How
I'm
did sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I sound like an old man, and I am an old man. I'm 69 now, and I'm like, oh, it was a wonderful time. Oh, I was so happy. It was such an honor. It really is. That's the nice thing about getting old. It's like, that really was an honor. That was really, I'm really grateful for that to happen. When you're like 22, you're like, yeah, it was kind of cool. But when you're an old man, you're like, yeah, you know what? That was a real blessing. That was a
Yeah.
truly blessed. That was truly blessed.
I'm glad you have that attitude towards it because I guess I was, correct me if I got the wrong impression. I was under the impression you sort of disavowed this whole project or maybe had some mixed feelings about it.
Well, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't put it back on stage. There was no funding. My cast, these people, my band, my cast had worked so incredibly hard for all those years. And again, none of that music was written down. It's all in everybody's head. And
Wow.
all the costuming and the dancing and this and that and the rehearsals to get that music to sound that good means a lot of rehearsal. And I didn't want anybody on stage thinking about the music when I wanted them all to be expressing. And the only way you can do that is by rehearsal, 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 rehearsal when it comes to music.
Hmm.
So here I lost the funding. Where are we going to go? We're going to go back to some crappy, to some other, sorry, strike that crappy,
All
some
right.
small little club and start all over again for what? We came all this way and the cast, my band, were not young people. They were all, I think I'm the oldest one, but they're all getting married. We had 2 pregnancies in the cast, a couple of marriages, careers were taking people this way, taking it that way. And it was just like, without the funding to like try to make something work, it all fell apart. And yeah, it was very, very hard for me. And I just kind of, like I said, disavowed it, not disavowed it, but just didn't want to talk about it because you get me talking about it, especially back then, you would have got me talking about it and I wouldn't have stopped. And another thing, this, like crazy old man ranting. So
But
now,
no, mhm,
now I'm fine.
I can tell. And for those of us who did witness it and maybe have been trying to, were you there? Did you see it? Did you used to go to that? Did you like I said, it was very hard to explain to people. If I tried to explain it to people who weren't there, maybe it would be the same kind of reaction that Conan had, like, oh, an Axl Rose musical, that haha. And it's like, no, 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 it what but no,
Right.
so now that the music's out there, it's the biggest piece of the puzzle obviously is the music. It's like it feels good to be able. I like sent clips, like I sent my friend who's a huge Duran Duran fan. I'm like, have you ever heard this song Duran Duran? It's hilarious. And she's like, what's this from? And I'm like, and I told her, and she's from New York, so she had never heard of this. She'd
Yep.
never heard of White Trash One's Lotto. I did my best to explain her what it was. Do you feel like, I don't know. I'm hoping, I know this is not why you put it out, but I feel like it could take on some new life in some way. In the streaming age, I feel like it could be some kind of, it doesn't have to be a live production. It could be
No,
something that's online, or
the lines are open, folks.
yay. What is
Yeah,
that recording from, by the way? Because I was under the impression that like no real recordings existed. It's obviously a recording of a live show. Where was it done?
it was
I
done at
hear
Roxy, and the idea was, I don't know why my camera is uh out of focus. Anyway,
you look fine. Look,
um, well, at the time I had a record deal with Universal, and they were my partners in this. And um, the idea was to record 5 shows at the Roxy and then take the recordings to Eastern Europe and use one of the former Soviet bloc symphonic orchestras to play on the selected tracks. So we would get an actual, more of a Gilbert and Sullivan, more of a Mozartian Verdi-esque track, yet have the actual live performances that everybody's bringing all that energy to. That was the idea. And then we veered from that. We did these recordings, they were all in the can, and then all of a sudden, an agent showed up and said, I can get you to Broadway. So everybody went, oh, Broadway. And there's a thing I call the Guffman effect. You know, the movie Waiting for Guffman? Yeah, mention Broadway and everybody changes, including you. And, you know, it just veered off that way and it went off the bridge, unfortunately, and we should have just put the record out. I felt like at the end of it, I felt like the Big Lebowski on the floor going, all the dude wanted to do was put out a record. It really
mm,
tied my life together. And that's all I really wanted to do at the end of the day. I'm sorry, it's like, I hate to sound so indecisive, but you're constantly being bombarded about the musical, the stage rights, the musical, the stage rights, film rights, musical, stage rights. And what I think as an artist, I failed to do is say, what do I do? I'm a musician. I make records. Let's make a record. And so 25 years later, here we
It's
go.
here. It's here. Did you ever do any other after after this was done, any other theater things?
No, no,
I mean,
it was,
you have such a talent for it. I mean, it's a shame you didn't.
thank you. Well, the lines are open, folks.
The lines are open. All right. Is there anything? I mean, we've had such a wonderful conversation. It's been like a dream come true to get to like talk to the creator of this great work of art. And I really hope a lot of people hear it now that it's out there. People who didn't get to, who weren't lucky enough to be in those small rooms in Los Angeles in the 90s and this was like a word of mouth. This was before social media, guys. People were just finding about because people like myself were saying, "Oh my God, have you seen this? It's
Right, and
hilarious."
that's interesting. You should say that because our policy was we never sought press.
Well,
We just said if they want to come, they can come. If the record companies want to come, they can come. If some film company wants to come, let them come. And here's the pitch. It's $20 at the door. No guest list. We have 15 people on stage. Moms and dads get in free. Everybody else, you got to pay because people got to get paid. And, after my years with Wall of Voodoo and the years of doing other bands that I was with, chasing record companies, it was like, yeah, you chase me now. It's just like we don't chase. We let the press come to us. We let the record companies come to us, and if they don't come, we can't be bothered. And that's we had at one point we had one of the oh, I'm sorry, am I boring you with all this
do
stupid?
I do I have like a bored looking face or
Sorry,
something?
sorry, sorry.
I have to fix my face if I look like I'm bored because I'm the opposite of bored. I'm interested.
Here's the weird thing that happened with White Trash early on. It was about 1990. It was like the first year I was there, first or second year I was doing it. I can't remember what year. And one of those LA magazines, I can't remember, like, the best of LA, that whoever does that, ran a blurb this big on me. Took a picture of me and said, blah, 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 Andy Prieboy, Wall of Voodoo, Axl Rose musical, White Trash wins Lotto, Largo, blah, blah, blah. About that big. The night it came out, I was lying in bed and I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep. And I was in this half dreamlike state. This is really, really strange. I was in this strange half dreamlike state. And I kept feeling like I could hear thousands and thousands and thousands of voices and it wouldn't stop. It would not stop. I'm a man who, sorry, I don't want to sound new agey or anything like that, but it was just this weird dreamlike thing with thousands of voices. Finally, I fell asleep, and the next day I woke up, and what had happened overnight was UP, United Press, right? They picked up on the story, and
You mean AP, Associated Press?
I'm
Okay.
sorry,
All right, yeah. So that's
They
everywhere.
picked up on the story, and it suddenly went everywhere because they were just using it for filler. And what had happened was everybody who had a talk radio show around the world was like, well, if you ever wondered what happened to Axl Rose, seems like somebody's writing a musical. And that's what sent it around the world. And I remember waking up one day and some radio station was doing improving on an Axl Rose musical. What do you think this musical sounds like? And they're doing this. I'm like, oh no,
I'm sure they had it so wrong.
oh yeah, they're all singing like Axl. But we also at that point had like channel somebody news saying, we want to come out to Largo and film you guys. And we went, no, we don't want you there. We don't want you. We don't want Channel 7 eyewitness news coming out and putting a spin on it. And no, thank you. Some newscaster coming out and putting some kind of, wacky Channel 4 news. So we were very, very, you come to us. And if you're not coming to us, that's perfectly fine. I'm sorry, I went off on a rant.
No, I like your rant because it must have felt really good after, like you said, being a rock musician in the crowded market of LA to have people, to have the tables turn, have people chasing you must have felt really great.
It felt great, but we were respectful about it and we were grateful for the attention, but we weren't gonna chase anymore. So anyway.
And it worked. It worked. And now I chased you for a few years until I finally got
Well,
this interview.
well, you didn't chase. You were very, very civil and very polite and very nice and very, very respectful. And I really appreciate that.
I appreciate you too, Andy. I mean, like I said, I'm very happy this is out there. It was, for me, it was great to revisit um the music and yeah, core memories. Like it all came rushing back, the
Really,
whole thing.
I'm really glad you were there to see it at Largo because that's where it was before there was a record contract, before there was Broadway. It was just what else can we do? I mean, we had that song Willie Bananas. I don't know if you remember that with Paul F. Tompkins and Blaine Capatch and
Don't
Greg
remember that
Garrett
one.
wearing bellhop uniforms. Does that ring a bell? That got written out. It was just shtick, just to get a laugh. But it was anyway.
You got
Fortunately,
all the laughs you got were legit laughs. It
yeah.
was like on so many levels brilliant. And I'm, like I said, I hope people discover it. If you stage a revival, I need to be there on opening night.
Yeah, or a concert.
I mean, I've got the pass, right? Does it still work? Is it still legit? Did it expire? No expiration date on it. A
You know what?
seat for every ass in Hollywood, my friends.
We had somebody come up to us and went, you know that thing you have on your pass that says a seat for every ass in Hollywood? We went, yeah. He goes, you know, you could take that two ways. And we went, no. It's like, Jesus.
This
It
musical wasn't for everyone.
wasn't for everybody.
But the people who got it really got it. And now hopefully a lot more people will get it. So thank you
Thank you,
so
Lynn.
much for putting this music out there. And this for this conversation. We talked about White Trash Wins Lotto for an hour. We
Well,
made up for that 25 years you
there
didn't
we
talk
go.
about.